Hi guys. Welcome. How are you? The Architect of Silence. Episode 1. The Grand Opening. The air of unearned triumph. For Elias Vane, the scent of fresh lacquer and expensive aged scotch was the smell of validation. 10 years of ramen and relentless code, transforming his small firm, Ether Design, from a concept sketched on a napkin into the technological backbone of the entire Thorn Group hotel chain. Tonight, the azure spire glittered against the city skyline, Elias's magnum opus. He designed the kinetic facade, the smart lighting systems, the self-regulating energy grid. This was his, not just a building, but a monument to his mind. He stood near the expansive marble bar, feeling the slight tightness of his rented tuxedo. He wasn't comfortable in this crowd of glittering socialites and media moguls. He belonged in front of a monitor, lines of code his language. But tonight, he was ready to step into the spotlight. The co-creator who delivered the Thorn Group's future. His gaze found Chloe across the room. She was magnificent, draped in a deep sapphire dress that matched the blue of the city lights reflecting in the skyscraper's glass. She was his entire world, his anchor in the Thorn Group's dizzying world of pretense. She was the one who kept repeating, "Tonight, Elias. Tonight you stop being the tech guy and start being the name." Her smile, usually so warm and genuine, seemed strained, almost brittle, as she tracked the movements of Marcus Thorn. Marcus, the heir, was already on the main stage, basking in the glow of the spotlights. He was the golden boy, possessing an effortless charisma that Elias, with his anxious energy and technical focus, could never mimic. Marcus had the Thorn name. Elias had the genius. Elias always thought that was a fair trade. The knife twist of recognition. The rhythmic pulse of the jazz band faded as Marcus tapped the microphone. The roar of the party instantly hushed, every pair of eyes fixed on the man who would inherit billions. "Welcome everyone to the Azure Spire," Marcus's voice boomed, perfectly modulated for the high ceilings. "Tonight is about legacy. It's about ambition. It's about the vision that will redefine luxury hospitality for the next century." Elias felt a nervous knot tighten in his stomach. This was the moment. He gripped the edge of the bar, anticipating the shout-out, the public handshake, the validation that would silence every skeptic who called him just a vendor. "And while many hands touch a project of this scale," Marcus continued, his eyes sweeping over the crowd with theatrical dramatic pause, "there is one figure whose singular focus and innovative genius drove the entire structural and technological execution. A mind whose approach is the only reason we stand here tonight. The future of the Thorn Group, and the true architect of the Azure Spire." Elias took a deep, shaky breath, already rehearsing his humble acceptance speech. "Thank you, Marcus. It's been an honor." Marcus's eyes stopped, landing not on Elias, but on the woman who gracefully stepped up beside him. "Please welcome my new partner, and the co-founder of the future of the Thorn legacy, my sister Sarah Thorn." The applause was thunderous. The room erupted. Elias Vane didn't move. He felt the blood rush from his head, leaving him dizzy and cold. Sarah, his younger sister, Sarah Vane. She stood there, radiant, accepting the applause. Elias felt the immediate, sickening physical sensation of being erased. Sarah had just graduated from business school and had spent a few months on the marketing team. She knew nothing about structural tech. The sisters' Indifference. Elias didn't walk. He stumbled toward the stage, weaving through the oblivious crowd. He finally saw Sarah's face clearly. She met his gaze, and there was no shame, no flicker of sibling loyalty, only a hard, blinding ambition. Marcus continued, unaware or uncaring of Elias's presence just below the stage. Sarah will now be taking the lead on all future architectural and design direction for the entire Thorn portfolio, effective immediately. Her business acumen, combined with her unmatched structural vision and ability to execute on our family's direction, is the new face of the Thorn Group. The phrase "unmatched structural vision" was a direct, mocking plagiarism of Elias's own pitch material. Elias's eyes snapped to Chloe, who was standing at the edge of the stage. Her role clearly defined as Marcus's logistic coordinator. She finally looked at Elias, but her eyes held a desperate plea, a silent, shameful confirmation that she was complicit. She had known. She hadn't warned him. The shock gave way to a blinding, agonizing rage. It was a dual betrayal. The theft of his entire professional life, orchestrated by the family he served, and the silent compliance of the woman he loved. Elias didn't make a scene. He simply turned and walked toward the staff exit, the music and cheers now sounding like distant mocking laughter in an echo chamber. The tribunal in the tower. Arthur Thorn, the chairman, didn't want the spectacle of a firing. 5 minutes later, Elias was in a glass-walled conference room on the 60th floor. Arthur sat at the head of the table. Marcus stood leaning against the window, and Sarah sat opposite Elias, clutching a sleek leather folder. Elias didn't bother sitting. His hands were braced on the polished veneer of the table, his knuckles white. "Arthur, this is professional misconduct," Elias stated, his voice tight, dangerously quiet. "Sarah has no technical qualifications. The IP, the ether assets, they are mine. You owe me the final stake and the credit we agreed upon." Arthur was calm, radiating a cold, paternal authority. "Elias, we valued your contribution, but we have to be pragmatic. Sarah is family. She has the long-term vision for the Thorn Group." Sarah, his own flesh and blood, finally spoke, her voice laced with the condescending pity of the superior sibling. "We felt you were becoming too granular, Elias. Excellent at the details, but you lacked the executive perspective necessary for scaling. My degree is in global finance. This is a business decision, not personal." Elias felt the deep, agonizing sting of his family's lifelong favoritism weaponized against him. "It's not personal. I put 10 years of my life into this. I haven't taken a real vacation in 4 years. This is my company, my legacy." Marcus finally stepped away from the window, his smile hard and predatory. "Ether Design was a vendor, Elias. Very generous vendor. Your contract was clear. The intellectual property rights for the designs used in the Thorn portfolio revert to the Thorn Group upon project completion. The contract is over. The designs are ours." He tossed a thick, rolled document onto the table. "The original contract. We are prepared to offer you a generous severance," Arthur interjected, sliding a paper toward Elias. "A clean 7-figure separation. Sign the remaining asset transfer, take the money, and enjoy a long rest." The sheer arrogance, the belief that he could be bought off like a noisy supplier, sent a jolt of ice water through Elias's veins. The chaos of his rage was instantly channeled into a razor-sharp clarity, the absolute calm of resolution. Elias stared at the severance document. The money was irrelevant. What they were stealing was his identity, his contribution, his future. They weren't firing him. They were erasing him. He lifted his head and looked directly at Sarah. "You let them call you the architect. You let them steal this." Sarah met his gaze, her expression impervious. "I'm taking the opportunity one earned, Elias. Don't be bitter." The bitterness was gone. Only a profound, cold resolve remained. Elias finally smiled. It was a thin, predatory, utterly devoid of warmth. "I won't be signing your severance. And you won't be getting the remaining assets, Arthur. You're right, Ether was a contract. But I wasn't just working for the Thorn Group. I was working on the Thorn Group." Arthur and Marcus exchanged looks of confusion. "You see, I dissolved the Ether Holding Company last week," Elias stated, his voice a low, confident drone. "It exists only as a shell. The true IP, the ongoing proprietary code for the next generation of our tech, was never in that contract. I retained it through a separate protected entity. More importantly, the key contracts with your top 3 hardware suppliers and the core talent of the engineering team have all been quietly transferred to the new entity. You have the name and the building. I have the future." Marcus's jaw tightened, the smugness instantly replaced by shock. "You're bluffing. You wouldn't risk being blackballed." "Risk?" Elias chuckled, a dry, unpleasant sound. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "I have nothing left to lose, Marcus. You taught me that tonight. You bought this grand tower, but I own the blueprints for your entire financial foundation." Arthur's face was now a dangerous shade of crimson. "You walk out of this room, Elias, and I will personally see to it that you are completely unemployable." Elias grabbed the severance document, tore it precisely in half, and let the pieces fall onto the table. "You can have the city, Arthur," Elias said, his gaze fixed on Marcus. "I'm going to spend the next 5 years watching the entire dynasty crumble." "Vow." He turned and walked out, leaving the stunned silence of the boardroom behind him. He ignored the frantic calls of Arthur and Marcus. He took the staff elevator down, the polished glass reflecting the cold fury in his own eyes. As he reached the street level, the humid Miami air was a sudden, sharp contrast to the air-conditioned tomb of the tower. He pulled out his personal, untraceable phone. He sent a single coded message to his 2 most loyal engineers, the ones who always resented Marcus and Sarah's arrogance. "Initiate Project Chimera. Clock starts now." He looked up at the azure spire, its lights mocking his failure. But the pain was gone. In its place was an immense, chilling resolve. He realized his emotional investment had made him weak. Now he was clean. He was free. He had been betrayed, and in return, he would deliver a slow, calculated, silent devastation. He started walking, putting distance between himself and the building that was now nothing more than a giant monument to his future revenge. The world thought Elias Vane had been defeated. They thought they had seen his last stand. They were wrong. The architect of silence had just begun building his most destructive masterpiece, the new skin. 5 years ago, Elias Vane walked out of the azure spire and vanished. He didn't scream, he didn't beg, he simply evaporated. In the interim, he had shed his old skin. The frantic, slightly rumpled architect was gone, replaced by Elias Thorn, a name he adopted from his mother's side. A name that sounded just as powerful as the dynasty he intended to destroy. He was now the lead designer for Ascendant Group, a rival architectural firm that specialized in quiet, surgical contract work. His new office was minimalistic, brutalist, all concrete and sharp, unforgiving edges, perfectly reflected his new philosophy. He no longer sought praise, he sought leverage. Marcus Thorn's face, smug and confident, stared back at Elias from the cover of Global Finance magazine. The headline lauded the Thorn dynasty's unstoppable ascent, highlighting their new $500 million project, the Olympus Tower, the biggest, most ambitious venture yet. Elias tossed the magazine onto his polished desk. Unstoppable. We'll see about that. His phone buzzed. It was a secure line from Leo, his former lead engineer and the first key ally in Project Chimera. Leo, who had quit the Thorn Group 3 years prior, had been quietly tracking the Olympus Towers procurement process. The pitch is set, Elias. They bought it hook, line, and sinker. Leo's voice crackled. They think Ascendant is the only firm capable of handling the structural tech integration. They need you. Elias allowed himself a cold, brief smile. Marcus's arrogance was his biggest weakness. He would never suspect that the best designer in the country, the only one who could handle a project of this scale, was the man he publicly humiliated and swore to blackball. The blackballing attempt had failed miserably because Elias was too talented to ignore. The return of the ghost. The next morning, Elias stood in the elevator of the Thorn Group headquarters. He wore a custom-tailored dark gray suit that felt like armor. His reflection showed a man who had mastered the art of impassivity. He wasn't Elias Vane, the victim. He was Elias Thorn, the necessary evil. He carried a sleek, heavy briefcase containing his proposal, and a separate encrypted drive containing the vulnerability dossier. A 5-year compilation of every weak link, every legal loophole, and every fractional financial misstep the Thorn Group had made since the day he walked out. When the elevator doors opened, he stepped onto the familiar floor. The atmosphere was the same, frantic, expensive, and buzzing with entitlement. He walked past the massive abstract art piece that he himself had commissioned years ago. The irony was exquisite. His destination, the executive boardroom for the official pitch meeting. He reached the frosted glass doors, took a final steadying breath, and pushed the heavy door open. The glimpse of the past. The room was packed. Marcus, flanked by his legal and financial advisors, and his father, Arthur Thorn, radiating silent authority. Sarah, surprisingly, was not present. But at the end of the long mahogany table, sitting perfectly composed with a stack of marketing materials, was Chloe. Elias froze. His meticulously constructed mask wavered for the first time in 5 years. She looked different. Her professional severity was magnified, but her eyes, those large, expressive hazel eyes, still held the same intensity he remembered, though now laced with an undeniable exhaustion. She had the look of someone perpetually trying to hold a crumbling facade together. She looked up as the door opened, her eyes sweeping over the new lead architect from Ascendant Group. Her expression remained blank, professional. But then, as her mind processed the features, the sharp, familiar jawline, the cold certainty in his eyes, her composure fractured. Her eyes widened minutely. The color drained from her face. The pen she held slipped from her fingers, hitting the table with a sharp clack. It was a tiny sound, but in the tense silence of the boardroom, it sounded like a gunshot. Marcus, preoccupied with stacking files, barely glanced up. "Ah, Mr. Thorn. Right on time. Please come in. Let's not waste any time." Elias forced his feet to move. He walked the length of the table, his posture rigid. He avoided looking directly at Chloe, but he felt the heat of her gaze burning into the side of his skull. He sat directly opposite Marcus, placing his briefcase on the table with a decisive thud. The unspoken accusation. Marcus began the meeting immediately, launching into a verbose, self-congratulatory speech about the Olympus Towers vision, completely dominating the conversation and leaving no room for discussion. Elias listened, his thoughts entirely focused on Chloe. He stayed. He chose him. She still works here. The fact that she was Marcus's right hand was a fresh stab of betrayal, but it also presented a vital opportunity. She knew everything about the Thorn Group's weaknesses. During a brief moment when Marcus was distracted by his phone, Chloe finally spoke, her voice dry and professional, addressing Elias as Mr. Thorn. Chloe, your firm's structural solutions for the facade are highly innovative, Mr. Thorn. But we need assurances that your digital security protocols can withstand extreme duress. This project is highly sensitive. Her words were a challenge, a subtle probe. She wasn't asking about firewalls. She was asking about him. Elias. Ms. Chloe's last name, Elias replied. His voice a low, steady rumble, using her formal name, the name he had once planned to change to his own. Our security protocols are designed to protect against threats from all angles, external and internal. He let his eyes meet hers for the first time since he entered the room. Her breath hitched, a faint, almost imperceptible sound. The air between them crackled with the 5 years of silence, anger, and history. Marcus, finally looking up, oblivious to the emotional explosion that had just occurred, cut in smoothly. Well, there you have it, Chloe. Ascendant is the best. Let's move on to the payment schedule. The first weapon. The meeting concluded with the Thorn Group formally accepting Ascendant's, Elias's, proposal. Marcus shook Elias's hand, his grip confident and condescending. Marcus. Welcome aboard, Elias. It's a good thing you changed your name. It sounds so much more authoritative. Elias simply nodded. I believe in authority that is earned, Marcus. As the other advisors filed out, Elias lingered. Chloe was busy stacking papers, clearly desperate to avoid a private moment. Arthur and Marcus were deep in conversation near the door. Elias walked slowly to the end of the table where Chloe stood. He lowered his voice, just loud enough for her to hear. Elias. I hope your marketing strategies have improved, Chloe. They'll need to be flawless to cover the sheer cost of the inevitable structural remediation this tower will require. Chloe froze, her spine rigid. She slowly looked up, her expression a mix of terror and comprehension. Chloe. What are you talking about? She whispered. Elias. The Foundation reports, Chloe. I remember the original ground surveys. Marcus didn't follow the geotechnical recommendations 5 years ago on the first tower. Corner was cut. He didn't think anyone would notice the long-term stress. Elias's voice was utterly devoid of accusation, just clinical fact. The Azure Spire is fundamentally compromised, and the Olympus Tower is being built on the same fault line, a structural lie. He paused, letting the implications sink in. He knew the deepest, darkest secret of the entire Thorn legacy. It's a beautiful design, though, Elias concluded, giving her a small, cold smirk. Your engagement ring was beautiful, too. But both were built on a lie, weren't they? He walked toward the door, leaving her breathless and shattered. The forbidden sketch, Cliffhanger. Elias reached the elevator, his heart finally beginning to pound. He had done it. He was inside the walls. As he waited for the elevator, he checked his briefcase. Tucked into an interior pocket, he found a folded piece of thick paper. It wasn't his. It was a simple old sketch of the Azure Spire's lobby, a preliminary concept sketch he had drawn years ago, a sketch only Chloe would recognize and still possess. Written quickly on the back in faint pencil was a single sentence. Don't build on 17B. Call me. 17B was the designation for the precise corner of the Foundation where the original, fraudulent geotechnical report was filed. Elias's hands went cold. She hadn't just recognized him, she had acted. She was either a spy for Marcus, desperate to trap him, or a desperate ally, willing to risk everything to undo her past betrayal. He didn't know which was more dangerous. He looked at the number scribbled below the warning. It was a burner cell number he didn't recognize. H. Elias looks down at the paper. The face of the woman who betrayed him is now offering him the key to the Empire's destruction. He carefully pockets the note. Does he trust her?